Hello, and welcome to the Failure Gap, where we talk with leaders about closing the space between agreement and alignment. We love talking with interesting people, and today we're joined by Tony Goncalves. Tony's career rode the rising tide of the streaming business. He was the CEO of Otter Media and then responsible for HBO Max, and was the EVP and Chief Revenue Officer of Warner Media. He exited in 2022 as AT&T spun Warner Media off into a joint venture with Discovery. And from there, he's begun his next climb, building his impact in his home country of Portugal through his role as CEO and founder of the Evrose Group. Tony, welcome to the Failure Gap.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have this conversation going. And thanks for joining us from Portugal. I think that's where you are today. Is that right?
It is actually, it's crazy. I left Portugal when I was 4 years old, and let's just say this house didn't look like that when I left. But I'm in my family home, which we bought and renovated. But it no longer looks like the Flintstones house in bedrock.
So there's not a little person out back with their feet running under the car trying to make the generator run.
No, it used to be cows and mules, but no, that doesn't exist anymore here.
Excellent. Well, we're just delighted to have you here. I would love for you, I've known you since your Warner Media days. I would love for you to just have a minute to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you're up to these days.
Yeah. So as you said, I'm Tony Goncalves. I spent over 25 years, nearly 30 years in the media, tech, and entertainment business. I started as a supplier of set-top boxes to DirecTV, ended up at DirecTV, ran a large portion of DirecTV's business for a bit. And then I became the agitator inside of DirecTV, the disruptor, as the streaming world sort of emerged. And we got gobbled up by AT&T. I went kicking and screaming to AT&T, which ended up opening sort of a world for me. And I'm incredibly grateful for those that pushed me to sort of go. And that's where the real pivot to streaming sort of started. We launched the second virtual pay TV operator, basically streaming cable company. And then that's where the media of it all kind of came in. I was fortunate enough to be tapped to run a portfolio of digital media assets that AT&T owned with a gentleman named Peter Chernin, the Chernin Group. And then AT&T decided to verticalize into video, which got me to Warner, which assumed my company. And being the fixer that I've been my entire career, the HBO Max launch wasn't going so well. And so I was asked to sort of tap in to that. And then the media business just got too expensive for AT&T. And so that's the spinoff of Warner, which basically marked almost 15 years to the day, by the way, of when I joined DirecTV, the original company. We sort of parted ways. And look, I sort of figured out that I needed this, like, to find the intersection of a profession, a passion, and a purpose. And that led me to forming the Evrose Group, which is basically building a bridge between between Portugal and the US, and trying to help Portuguese entrepreneurs, media, tech, and entertainment companies, and executives build bridges across the Atlantic.
Yeah,
Very meaningful.
I love that. I love that idea of building bridges. And you've just come off, I think, a pretty big success with the Tribeca Film Festival that has been hosted in Lisbon? Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the things, it's funny, I actually started this thinking we were going to export things, right? Like figure out a way to take lower cost, high value talent and ideas and sort of bridge them over the Atlantic. And instead, one of the largest examples of what we've been doing and what I've been able to do is with lots of humans around to help execute it, is import the Tribeca Festival, which Robert De Niro and Jane Rosenthal started almost 25 years ago after 9/11, to Lisbon. And we just came off of our second edition. It was amazing.
Congratulations on that. What a great success. And, hopefully 25 years from now, people will be talking about that Tony guy.
Yeah. Or not. Like, if 25 years from now, people are talking about the craziness and the surrealness of the Tribeca Festival coming to Lisbon and how that enabled an incredible volume of local talent to be put on a global stage to then make Portugal the, sort of the next wave of production, and Portuguese talent, the next sort of seed into Hollywood. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would. I love that vision and that purpose that you have, in the clarity you have around that, and it actually makes me think about the failure gap and the idea that there's a lot of people who will sit around and say, "Wouldn't it be great if we did this?" But a lot of people struggle to put those kinds of ideas into action, and you're doing that now in a very different way from the first 15 years of your career. You've made a pretty significant pivot, which, by the way, is something that a lot of people are in the failure gap around. Like, I should pivot my career. I should do something different. I should have more purpose and passion. There's a lot of that we hear from leaders. And you've had some really significant accomplishments in putting Portugal on the map from a media perspective. So maybe let's start with that first one, your career pivot, and, taking that opportunity as you exited, at the merger, to really think about what you wanted to do next. I think so many people go through that experience and they just drop into the next thing, and they're just kind of in a scramble maybe to land something, and they really want to just kind of get on with things. But it feels like you really grounded yourself in what would be a purpose driven way to go forward. I would love if you could share some of your thinking about that and how you, have propelled yourself into what you're doing today.
Yeah. So look, listen, it was very deliberate. Um, and it was not easy. I mean, think of it. You work 25, almost 30 years, and you're sort of defined by your job. You're defined by your role. You're defined by your industry. I write a lot about this, on my LinkedIn profile, because I think it's really important. Amazon just, announced they were going to lay off 14,000 they were going to eliminate 14,000 corporate jobs. And I just sat there and I thought, these are 14,000 people that have likely been at Amazon for a long time.
Mm.
And when you're at a big company like that, I saw it at AT&T, I saw it at DirecTV, you start getting defined by the seat and the title on the business card, and the platform, which is the company. And it's really difficult to separate. And so when the merger was announced, I kind of made the call at that time. I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I've been through four of these. These are hard, really hard. And by the way, like, none of them really fulfilled me. It's a grind, right? There's somebody else's strategy, somebody else's objectives, somebody else's words, somebody else's transformation. And the day the merger was announced, I was like, look, I will commit myself to making sure that my team is set up to succeed in this next. That was my purpose, right? In this next chapter. Um, but I'm kind of done. But I was unclear as to what would be next for me. And it was my wife that sort of pushed me coming out of Warner. She's like, look, we were building a house here. It wasn't going well. She's like, look, go to Portugal. That's where you feel at home. And like, go find yourself. That was go find the next thing. And I started nurturing. I felt good. I felt at home, and I started nurturing a new network. And there was a realization there that like a new network is going to get me to where I need to go, not the network that I nurtured over 30, over 25 years,
Mhm.
almost 30 years. And so there's a bunch of things there, but like it was a very deliberate decision. And it was this awareness that like, it wasn't the people that I built my career around that were going to help me make that pivot. It
Mm.
was and that takes work.
Yeah. That that is so interesting to me, Tony, because so often when people are in times of transition, it is their existing network that they lean on to say, where else could I go? What else could I do? And that network is going to be a bit limited in what they see in you as a human, and also what they're able to connect you to, because they're all in the same ecosystem that you have been in for however long. And I think that push to say you might have to do some work to build a new network if what you want to do is go in a new direction. I
Look,
also I
I
also
think
love. Go ahead.
No, no, I think the other thing is, and this is just, it's where you're humans, it's just human
Yeah.
nature. The other thing is the majority of that network's not going to be there for you,
Hmm.
right? And hasn't, by the way, it's not personal and it feels personal,
Yeah.
right? But you just have less in common today than you did yesterday. And it hurts for a little while,
Hmm.
but it's just natural, right? And, but that is where people start. It's okay to start there. Um, but it's also really important to understand what you're optimizing for in these moments of transition. Are you optimizing for relevance, right, in the given industry? Are you optimizing for title? Are you optimizing for money? Are you optimizing for learning? Are you optimizing to diversify yourself? Um, by the way, those are all the right answers. I think the important thing is to understand what we're optimizing for. And I was
Wow.
optimizing for purpose, right? For over 25 years, whether I believed it or not, I had to do it. Whether I felt it was, I couldn't be, let me say it a different way. I wasn't able to be objective. And for the first time in my career, I found an opportunity to be objective and to be a personal capitalist. And so it was again it was very deliberate. It was really hard, really hard.
Hmm. Yeah. I love your emphasis on the deliberate choice that you made to do something that was hard. And I think that sometimes also when we're in times of transition, we forget to be deliberate about the choices that we're making because it's easy to just go with what you know, to go with the people that you know in your current network, to go with the work that you know how to feel like you know how to do, and to kind of stay in that comfort zone. And I feel like what you did very deliberately was you stepped out of that comfort zone and into a new and somewhat uncharted space for yourself.
Look, incredibly uncharted. I learned how to snowboard when I was 40,
Okay.
you know, and I didn't get good until I was like 45,
Ooh,
right?
it's a
And so
tough learning curve.
that's my point, right? Which is, had I learned how to snowboard when I was 10, or 5, my son was 5. We actually learned together, right? He surpassed me a
I would
lot
say
faster
he probably
than I.
learned faster than you did.
He learned faster and he's well ahead of me at this point.
Yeah.
Um, had I started earlier, as opposed to saying, I can never do that. Like I'm barely a skier. That's hard. Um, I would have been, I'd be a pretty good snowboarder. I'm less than a mediocre snowboarder today, but I did it. Like
Yeah.
I jumped into it. And I think, I had always had this thought that at some point in my career, um, international would be part of something that I do. Europe would be part of something that I would do. And then I started asking myself, like, why? And the reality was just to be closer to Portugal at the end of the day, because that's where I'm from. And then it became very clear that I don't only need to be closer, I am almost sort of at a period of giving back. And it became a bit of a mission.
And I think sometimes people hear that call and I don't want to say maybe disregard is too hard of a word, but they quiet it down inside of themselves because it is hard to make that shift when you've gotten your reinforcement and validation and again that comfort zone from what you know how to do, and you might not know how to pursue that calling. And I think one of the things that's so interesting for you, by the way, I love the joy and also the transparency of your LinkedIn feed as you share different moments along the way. You're very generous with that. So thank you. But one of the things
Thank
that
you.
I
Yeah.
have noticed in your messaging is that um, you are pushing yourself to try a lot of different kinds of ways to have that impact in Portugal that you now feel called to have. And it seems like you are really finding those opportunities, not just saying, well, what's available and I'll go do that.
No, it's it's quite the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's not what's available.
Yeah.
That feels like something fairly uncomfortable and can I actually bring anything to it? And can it bring something to me? I have a podcast. Never in my life, never did I think I'd have a podcast. And I have a podcast. It's the first English language podcast for one of the biggest media companies here in Portugal. It started it was a growth strategy project. It was like, look, I think you guys are a prominent media company. You have a great news organization. It's a news organization called Espresso, storied past. And there's so much interest in Portugal and there's so many expats here. And I'm like, you guys should be doing English language content. Fast forward, and they were like, we're going to do a podcast. I was like, it's a great idea. Let's produce it. So let's go sit down and think about, ideas and guests. And they're like, no, we'd like you to be the guy, the host. And it was like, I was mortified, right? I mean, we're on our 50th episode at this point, but I thank them for pushing me because I didn't know that I had that in me. And frankly, I don't really have that in me, but it's given me so much, right? It's nurtured my network.
Yeah.
I've learned so much about this country. I've learned so much about the people. And so, it's that whole notion of like being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, it's okay. It's really okay. Like, we don't all have it figured out. Like the Instagram feed and the LinkedIn feed, it's like we only share the good things, right? Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important for me to share my struggles. Because, I spent a career in very large, prominent organizations and roles, and people thought I had the best life in the world and I had the best career in the world. It was freaking hard, right? And it's harder now. There's no infrastructure. It's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. You're out on a limb with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we're going to put a link to your podcast in the show notes for anybody who's interested in learning more about what you're doing there. So please check out the show notes for more on Tony's podcast. But I think this idea that we can continue as we grow in our careers and we get older, and it's easy to settle down into things. And I think one of the things that you're doing that is so interesting, and again, failure gap, people agree it's a good idea, but they have a hard time doing it, is to say, I can keep learning. I can keep doing hard things. And as someone who's snowboarded for a long time, I know learning to snowboard in your 40s, God bless you. I learned in my 20s and, luckily still had the
and still God bless you.
It's still, still got knocked up a couple of times. But, I think about, just quickly, I'll tell you this, my parents got certified to scuba dive when they were 68 and 70 respectively. And they had 10 to 15 great years of scuba diving. Like, we can still be on this great adventure in life at any point that we choose to take life up on it, right? At any point that we choose to lean into it. And I think one of the things that I really love about what you're doing is you are taking life up on what it's bringing to you, and you're also making your way for yourself. You're building for yourself what you believe is your mission and your impact. And I think we've had a few successes. Yeah. Well, we all try, right? There's actually, you know what? I'm going to pull this up because I have it right here. And this is not a plug for my book, but in my book, there's a quote, a really beautiful quote. Let me just find it real quick. This was not planned, by the way. We might have to, I don't know, edit it out. But there is a quote about courage, and it's a really beautiful quote from Marianne Radmacher. And it says, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow."
Amen.
Yeah, I love that. Doesn't that just like touch your heart, right?
Yeah, it does, because, and by the way, it's easy to convince ourselves that we can't do it. I'm working on something right now, that was inspired by a meme that I saw. And sort of these, like, it says, what if I fail? Right? What if I fail? Because that's what we fear when we go into something new, right? What if I fail? What if I succeed? Right? What if you just flip the question? What if I succeed? And you start telling yourself that narrative, using that narrative as like a positive self-talk, and you can convince yourself that it's a good idea. And so there's a bit of a mindset shift, right? The podcast, Like I stutter.
What if you succeed?
Like I have a mind, like my mind's all over the place. Like I can't, it's
Yep.
hard for me to sort of condense thoughts and, um, it's hard. It was incredibly difficult and it still is. I did a panel last week. It was three people I didn't know, very prominent folks. And I spent weeks, right, writing 30 pages of questions and then like narrowing it down to 10. And then I threw it all away. And then I started from scratch. It's just, what if I screw up when I'm on stage? Like that's how it started. And so let me over prepare. And then it's like, well, what if I don't screw up?
Yeah.
Right? What
And
if I
what if you're good at
simplify
it?
this thing? Right? And just like lean
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
to the moment. And so I love that quote. I think it's really, really important. I have one that I sort of live by. It's JFK, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's, you know, um, uh, those that look only to the past will miss the future. And so back to like your old network not giving you what you need for sort of your next chapter. Like if we just keep looking at what we did, we will never see what we can do. Um, and I was a very hardwired executive, like calendared,
Yeah.
like it was
I
mechanical,
remember.
right?
Yeah.
And I never knew what anything else was. It was just like, every other day, 8 o'clock stand up with my head of HR and my chief of staff, right? Like it was just, um, and the unlock was beautiful.
Well, I think it's so helpful for people that you've actually given us a couple of really salient ideas about how to move from agreement that something's a good idea into alignment. And one is make a deliberate choice, like be intentional and be clear about the decision that you're making to pursue something different or to push yourself and be willing to do something hard. Like this idea that it's not going to be easy, but that's okay. It's okay for it to be hard. And that as you do that, you have to be willing to go into new pastures, right? How do you leave some things behind, even though there might be some grief associated with that, and go expand your world? And that means growing your network, getting to know different even geographies. Maybe it's reconnecting in your case with Portugal and your roots there, or it's exploring a new territory altogether. And then this idea that you can flip your narrative from what if I fail to what if I succeed? And what does that look like? And by the way, sometimes I think the answer to what if I succeed can be scarier than the answer to what if I fail.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
succeeding can be scary, right? Like, okay, you're succeeding, by the way, as a podcast host. So guess what? That means you get to do more podcasts. Right?
Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
brutal. Uh, and it's not a great living, if
Yeah,
at
right.
all.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'll give our listeners another tip. Um,
Yeah.
I got this, I was evaluating a new job and, I was sort of stuck and I went to somebody for some help and they said, write it down, write down two versions of this story. One is, what if it goes wrong? One is, what if it goes right? And he said, what you'll learn is, um, either way, it'll be fine. Because if it doesn't go well, you will have learned something. And if it does go well, it went well. Right. And so either way, and so I do some executive coaching. I use a loosely based narrative method and we write press releases. We spend 6 weeks, together once a week and we write press releases and we keep tweaking the press release, right? We start envisioning what a future might look like. And to your point, like they're typically based on successes and those can be really scary.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
what do you mean I want to run a $20 billion fund? That's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but that's it. That is what. So now let's work back. Like, what does it take for you to get there?
Yeah. And I think you've also touched on for you the shift from just those success factors, which are totally fine, that we often have around work, but also now looking at a success factor around your mission and the impact that you want to have. And being successful in that space has a whole different set of consequences, and so does failure. And so I think that's something else for people to think about, is it's not just about how do I get to that next external marker of success, but also how do I fulfill what I believe is my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and finding it is hard. Finding the purpose, finding a mission is hard. I had Daniel Pink on in a town hall once, and it was during COVID, and it was really difficult to define purpose. And he gave us some, and I'll never forget. He's like, look, we all want the capital P purpose, right? The big purpose, but it's important to find the lowercase p purpose. And that's your daily purpose. It's your hourly purpose. Like, what am I here for now? And I think it was like it was a moment. It was, well, one, it was very needed at that time. But two, it also just identified that, like, it doesn't have to be this grand thing, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, your mission doesn't have to be this great, like, we don't have to, we're not solving world hunger. We're not solving cancer.
Right.
And so it's like, we're finding a cure for cancer. We can find purpose in our day to day, and we can find purpose in our own world, right? Like, I don't know, Portugal and putting Portuguese talent on a global map. Like, that's my purpose.
With a capital P.
It's my capital P.
Yeah,
right?
Portugal with a capital P, right?
Portugal with a capital P. There you go. There you go.
Yeah. I think it's also like what Marianne Radbacher says about courage, right? There's courage with a capital C, which is like, I'm going to run into a burning building and save some puppies. And then there's the lowercase c courage, which is every day I'm going to get up and try again tomorrow and see what else I can do to make a difference. I think that's a really important distinction. And I think that actually that does hold people back, and it keeps them in agreement that something would be a good idea if they did it, but they're not actually ready to do it yet because they're waiting for that capital P purpose, right? Or that capital C courage, that big moment, when really what will get them there is if they lean into, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do in this conversation? What am I going to do with this moment to move towards what I think I want to do in terms of impact?
And what happens a lot, Julie, is, when we get, we're, again, human nature, right? We get into these moments, we convince ourselves, and then that we can't. And then, and then most of us just don't make decisions. We're like, we're just going to park that. Yeah, shouldn't I? I'm just not going to make the call.
That's the failure gap.
Not making the call is the problem, right? If you think about it, a baseball player, sports analogy, it's the hardest thing. If they go up to bat and they never make a call, they are the worst player to ever play. If they make the right call half of the time, they're the best. There's never been anyone better. Right?
It's such a crazy sport that way.
Right? And it's so the worst thing is to say, I want to learn how to use Photoshop. Which, by the way, it's been one of my things. Like, I've never learned how to use Photoshop. So I never actually make the call to go do it. But like, if I did and I was like half good at it, it actually probably saved me a lot of time and money and frustration. Great. Because then I can put what's in here on paper. Now I have to go explain it, and I have to get people to go do it, and then it doesn't come back right. And it's like, blah, 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 right? So I think making the call is a really important way to narrow the gap.
I agree. Well, I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to talk about a place where you did make the call and you said, I'm going to make this happen, and it's going to be hard, but I'm going to follow through on it and do what needs to be done to bring the Tribeca Film Festival to Portugal. Tell us a little bit about that journey, and for you as a leader and as someone needing to step into a new environment and I'm sure build new connections and contacts. what was that like as you moved from agreeing, I'm sure for yourself that sounded like a good idea, but how are we going to get there? How are we going to make that happen? And now you've done it 2 years in a row.
So I think the story behind that is a lot more about trust and alignment than anything else. Like I didn't have this grand idea. An old colleague of mine took a new job at Tribeca, and he called me, for a mentor lunch because he trusted me, and he trusted my opinion, and he trusted, my guidance. We had a long lunch, and I heard him. I was a young guy, new role, different than what he was doing before, and I just wanted to help him. Um, and I came to Portugal. It might have even been that week. And I landed and I'm like, wouldn't it be awesome if I helped him, uh, you know, expand internationally? Um, and I started figuring out, like, in my head, like, how would I connect these dots? Like, I didn't have that big of a network here, but whatever my network was, it was small, but it was tight. And there was a lot of trust. I advised the largest media company here. I had gotten to know the mayor of Lisbon quite well, and there was chemistry. And that's really what it was. And I was like, "Hey, Chris, what do you think?" And he's like, "That would be amazing." And then the media company had a gap in sort of how they needed to go to market, and so and there was a lot of trust there. Um, and the mayor and I were both, immigrants, and we had that sort of link, and we had built a nice relationship. And I put the three of them together. So at the end of the day, I was a dot connector, really. Um, but the common thread in all of that is these three people trusted me, that I had, that I had their best in mind, right? That I was doing this with positive intent. Um, and that's really what happened. And you talk about bureaucracy and you talk about how long deals take. This deal took 3 months to conclude, and within a year we had a festival. And so I really think that trust is what brought this to life, and then timing, right? Like we had the right mayor. We had a media company that needed something different and unique, and has a mission as well. And we had an entity that was looking to grow. And so timing and trust, the two T's.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I would encourage our listeners to not discount either one of those. And sometimes we do have to wait for the timing to be right. We might have a great idea, but it's the wrong time, and that's frustrating. But it doesn't mean that you have to let something go altogether. It might mean you have to come back to it. And this idea of trust and building that network of trust.
Yeah, and look at the timing. I mean, I'm chuckling because I think it was during our time working together. I spent nearly 5 years at DirecTV trying to move the company to a streaming world, and it just, was hitting my head against the wall. I mean, we tried to buy Hulu twice. We launched a Spanish language streaming service. It didn't really go well. It was shut down fairly quickly. And then we get to AT&T and T, and we launched in 5 months. Like,
Yeah,
it's crazy,
the time was
right?
right.
So the timing was right. And I had a CEO that trusted me at that moment. And so the two T's kind of played a role there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great things to watch out for people who are trying to get a big idea from agreement that it's a good idea to actually bringing it to life. Is sometimes you do have to look for that timing, and building your network and building trusted relationships while you're waiting for the timing to be right can be a great investment as you have that vision of the impact that you want to have and the purpose that you want to live and deliver on. So
Yeah.
thanks for that, Tony. I want to just kind of bring us home to our last couple of questions here. One is, if you had two or three things that you would just say to people, if you're trying to get yourself going, if you're trying to take that definitive step towards something, these are the two or three things to really keep in mind. We've touched on a few of them in this conversation, but what for you do you want to make sure we leave people with?
Look, I think this notion of the mindset of, yeah, but let me take a step back. When something's new, it's unfamiliar. When it's unfamiliar, it's scary. When it's scary, you typically don't do it, right? And so I'd say starting with recognizing that it's in that fear that you will grow, right? It's in that fear that you will grow. And that's sort of that starting there and recognizing that there is opportunity on the other side and there is potential positive outcome on the other side is a bit of a mindset shift. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. The other one is I really believe in this notion of like, write it down. Write it down. What does it look like if it fails? What does it look like if it succeeds? And unintentionally, like it'll just pour out and we'll see that if it fails, it's a win. And if it succeeds, it's a win, right? Because we'll see that what we've learned along the way. And so those are probably my two. It's that sort of positive self-talk and that writing it down, because it does help us develop those thoughts.
Yeah, both of those I think are great suggestions. I'll tell you a quick story about writing something down. When I was 29 years old, I worked with a financial advisor for the first time. I had just bought my first house by myself. Like it was a big investment, right? And I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do? And he had me write down a visualization for my 50th birthday. Like, what did I want? Where did I see myself? What did I want to be wearing? Like a very specific process. And I wrote it all down. And then I stuck it in the binder that he had given me with all of, the other financial planning stuff that we were doing together. I worked with him for about a year. And do you know, the year that I turned 50, I happened to find that binder and I pulled it out and I looked at this thing that I had written down that I had literally not looked at since I was 30 years old, because I put the binder away at some point and never looked at it again. And I had described what I would be wearing on my 50th birthday. And then I went and looked at a picture of myself from my 50th birthday. And do you know that's what I was wearing? How crazy is that?
Look, it's that
It's
is amazing.
Yeah.
It's not surprising. We
Yeah.
are who we are. We do tend to
Yeah.
manifest even if we don't believe that we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And that's why like people, you're always given this advice, at the beginning of the year, write it down and throw it
Mm-hmm.
away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Write down your
Yeah.
objectives and then just don't ever don't look at them again, because subconsciously they're in you. And I think it's a really good practice. And I'm going to use your example in some of my interactions, because I think that's like the best example ever. It like sits in you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, I could not believe it when I saw it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that you hold on to it, even what was that 30, 40, 50, 20 years later, right? There I was manifesting something I'd written 20 plus years before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either that
That's
or
awesome.
Tony, maybe my style just never changed.
So I said, we are who we are.
We are who we are, right? We are who we are. Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
probably said I would probably say I was wearing a suit and a tie, and, I don't wear suits and ties anymore.
Yeah. Look at you. But maybe if you'd written it down, you still would. I don't know.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
there is
hey,
an element of missing that at some point.
Yeah. When you let it go. When we wrap up, we always like to ask people if there was one thing that you could see a community of people that you're involved with get aligned behind and actually, get into action. Is there anything that comes to mind that you would really love to see? It could be your family, it could be your community, it could be for work, it could be for the world, something that you would love to see people get aligned to and bring into action. Anything that comes to mind for you?
That's a really good question. So my son just ran a half marathon, his first,
Great.
right? Talk about the fear, he prepared, he had a great time. He had a great time.
Yeah.
That was Sunday. We are sitting here Tuesday. It's 2 days ago. Yeah. He just signed up for the New York City Marathon next year.
That's so exciting.
What I would love is for us to have done that as a family, right?
Mm.
Gotten aligned around, we're going to run a 5K together. We're going to run a half marathon together. And then we're going to run a marathon together. And I say that because every time I talk about running, I say, oh, I'm too old to start. I say, I get too winded. Say, I can't run a mile, moreover, 5, moreover, 10, moreover, 20. And I convince myself I'm not able to do it. So you might have just unlocked something for our family to get
Excellent.
aligned on.
I love that. I'm going to check in a year or two and see if you guys are running marathons together.
Yeah. Well, we just
And
said it.
and
Maybe we'll write it down and maybe it'll come true.
exactly. We'll write it down. And, some of the things that you've shared with our listeners in this episode can help you, right? One is make a deliberate choice, accept that it will be hard. Be willing to expand your network. You might have to meet other people who are in your age group, who are starting runners, right? Beginning runners. How do you
Yeah.
grow and
The run
cultivate that
club.
network, right? Yeah. And some of the other things that you've talked about here, I think are really, you know, will help you to bring that to life if that's something that you and your family decide to get aligned on and get done. So I'm looking forward to checking back in a while and seeing how that's going. In
Yeah.
the meantime, Tony, thank you so much for a great conversation. It's been so fun to talk with you and catch up a bit on what's going on in your world. And I appreciate all that you've shared with our listeners about your experiences of moving from agreeing that something's a good idea to getting aligned and getting it done as you work to deliver on your impact and this mission that you feel you're called to now back in Portugal. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's really been great reconnecting with you and seeing what you're doing, and how you're helping people bridge this gap. I think it's extremely important, and not enough of us do that. So it's been really great.
Great. Thank you so much. For our listeners, just remember, we like to say to go far, go together, to go fast, go alone, to go far, fast, get aligned and get it done. We'll see you on our next episode. Just a reminder to check out the show notes for contacts for Tony and the different work that he's doing. And remember to like, listen, and share with others. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.